Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is information@cuandreview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 22nd of January 2025, from the business section. Heartbeat of Glasgow economy needs footfall injection. This article is by Christy Dorsey. Further curtailment of remote working would increase the number of people in the city centre, but other measures are also needed to fully rejuvenate the heartbeat of Glasgow's economy, according to a leading business figure. Stuart Patrick, Chief Executive of the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, said footfall is still below levels prior to COVID for a number of reasons that need urgently addressed. In addition to continuing work-from-home policies, these include a lack of affordable transportation, as well as rent controls that limit the number of people living in the city centre. His comments come after former Asda and Marks & Spencer boss Stuart Rose said earlier this week that working from home is creating a generation of people who are not doing proper work. The Conservative peer added that remote working is partly to blame for lower productivity and the UK economy's general decline. According to the Glasgow Chamber, the city is now experiencing year-on-year improvements in footfall, which had been declining up until late last year. However, the numbers for December 2024 were still roughly 15% lower than in the same month prior to the COVID outbreak. The city centre is the heartbeat of Glasgow's economy, yet it continues to face significant challenges in recovering from the pandemic, with footfall still below pre-COVID levels, Mr. Patrick said. We know that there are three key issues which need to be urgently addressed. The first is the nighttime economy, which once thrived, but is now in need of revitalisation. A key issue is the provision of travel services, especially after the working day ends. Currently, services remain critically below pre-pandemic levels, which has a significant impact on the nighttime economy. Research indicates that 48% of city centre visitors are seeking more affordable train fares, underscoring the demand for sustainable and accessible travel options. Latest figures on nighttime footfall are up marginally on the same period a year ago, but during the weekdays are down by an average of 8%. The Glasgow Chamber says nighttime operators have nonetheless reported a poor festive trading period, in part due to adverse weather conditions. Mr. Patrick said another big issue is the need to grow the city centre population. The Scottish Government must consider a relaxation of rent controls on new build-to-rent properties, he said. Equally, the reintroduction of the business premises renovation allowance by the UK Government would be helpful in stimulating developments. As for working from home, Mr. Patrick said this is having a real impact on the city's economy, with card sales data from December showing a 1.2% decline from December 2023. Footfall Monday to Friday remains much lower than before the pandemic, he noted. This is largely due to widespread work-from-home policies, which many offices continue to implement to varying degrees. This has not been helped by a reintroduction of peak trains, which removed the only policy introduced post-pandemic, which actively encouraged employees back into the office. In a snapshot survey in December by the Office for National Statistics, 26% of people across the UK said they had split their working time between home and the office during the previous 7 days. A further 13% were fully remote, 41% were based fully in the office, and the remainder were not working at the time. Speaking to BBC One's Panorama earlier this week, Lord Rose said, "We have regressed in this country in terms of working practices, productivity, and in terms of the country's well-being, I think, by 20 years in the last 4. People who drive trains have to go to work. People who work in operating theatres have to go to work. People who work in services industries like retail have to go to work. And others don't. They have children, they have problems, they have issues, they just deal with them." Lord Rose was the chief executive for M&S for 6 years until 2011, and then executive chair of its supermarket rival Asda until November. He was created a life peer in 2014 when he took his seat in the House of Lords. That article was by Christy Dorsey. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 22nd of January 2025 from the business section. Scotland study on floating wind farms on an industrial scale. This article is by Brian Donnelly. A new offshore energy hub in Scotland is to play a key part in the groundwork towards building floating wind farms in the North Sea. Saren's PSG Offshore Wind Centre of Excellence has been chosen as the base for a major study aimed at enabling the rapid and cost-effective deployment of floating wind turbines on an industrial scale. The offshore wind assembly, transportation and launch specialists in Aberdeen's energy transition zone have been commissioned by renewable energy partners, the Blue Float Energy and Nadara Partnership, to pioneer innovative solutions for transporting floating foundations from land to sea. The study will focus on developing methods to deploy completed floating wind structures directly from construction or production facilities to operational sites. It aims to achieve this for production line scale volumes spanning multiple operational years. By investigating deployment operations, the study will identify key cost, risk, and scheduling implications and assess the impact of these factors on port infrastructure within the context of the partnership's ambitious projects. The announcement comes as hundreds of industry leaders, government and stakeholders prepare to gather for the Scottish Renewables Offshore Wind Conference in Glasgow on January 22nd and 23rd. Key challenges under examination include ensuring safe, fast and low-risk processes while minimizing costs and assessing the most effective and appropriate use of high-specification port infrastructure, critical for the successful industrial-scale deployment of floating offshore wind technology. Saren's PSG said it will leverage the world-class engineering expertise of its partner, Saren's NV, a global powerhouse in engineered heavy lift and transport. Steve Clark, managing director of Saren's PSG, said, "While deployment techniques have been trialled in smaller-scale demonstrator projects, scaling these processes to achieve major deployments with next-generation solutions at pace and cost-effectively will be transformative for the industry." He added, "This investment in innovative research underlines the partnership's commitment to delivering successful floating offshore wind projects that are pivotal to global energy transition efforts and achieving net zero targets. It has the potential to be an absolute game changer for the sector. David Robertson, UK Portfolio Director at the Blue Float Energy and Nadara Partnership, said, "These studies represent a significant step forward in the development of our pipeline of floating offshore wind projects in Scotland, and will not only deepen our understanding of some of the most pertinent technical challenges facing our industry, but also leverage local expertise through the regional supply chain. It comes as Scotland was urged separately that it must do more to help run-of-river hydropower facilities maximize their output and prevent negative impacts on wildlife in the face of the challenges posed by climate change, according to a new report. Scotland's Centre of Expertise for Waters, CREW, commissioned the report, which is published today and is based on research from the University of Glasgow and CBEC Eco Engineering. They worked closely with partners at hydropower companies, Scottish Canals, SEPA and Nature Scot on the report, which lays out a series of recommendations to help tackle the problem of sediment build-up at dams and weirs across the country. Planting trees alongside rivers, restoring peatland, and tree planting more broadly across river catchments could help reduce the amount of sediment entering rivers by capturing it before it reaches the waterways, it was found. That article was by Brian Donnelly.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 23rd of January, from the news section. The most viewed Robert Burns relics revealed, including socks he wore. Article by Mark McDougall. The National Trust for Scotland has revealed the 5 relics of Robert Burns' life that have most captured people's attention in the first year of the online collection. The conservation charity launched a new portal giving unprecedented access to more than 2,500 historic items in its collection of the Bard in spring 2024. It includes manuscripts, archives and artefacts which are held in store for their long-term preservation and protection. The Trust cares for the largest collection of Burns artefacts, as well as the cottage he was born in, where the first Burns supper was held after his death. The Trust has revealed the 5 most viewed items, which give some sense of the public's fascination with Burns and how he lived his life. The 5 items that rank highest among the public include a wooden box which contain Jean Armour's wedding ring, alongside 2 other rings that have a lock of Burns' hair and a lock of hers. A pair of the Bard's socks with the initials RB at the top are also on the list, and a date from around 1770 to 1796. A fragment of the manuscript of Burns' Auld Lang Syne, of which only 6 are known to still exist, dating around 1793, is another fan favourite, as is a lock of Highland Mary's hair, which was preserved in a Bible tied to a piece of dark grey card. The final item on the list is a letter to George Sutherland, dated December 31st, 1789, which includes a 34-line poem that was used at his New Year's performance of the Dumfries Theatre Company in January 1790. Caroline Smith, the National Trust for Scotland's operations manager at the Robert Burns Birthplace Museum, said, "This list features some of my personal favourites from our collection. It seems to be the personal objects that resonate with people, and that they help them form a connection with Burns the man, the ordinary guy who wore socks just as much as the famous words he wrote." The box of rings is an amazing item, as it is quite popular at the time to keep a lock of hair, but it's very special that the rings have survived all these years. Jean's wedding ring is a precious item symbolising Burns' everlasting love, and it's hard to not feel sentiment behind this. I think the initialised socks are incredible. Just imagine your socks being kept and displayed in the museum for almost 230 years after your death. There's also something very humbling about them. They have clearly been worn and therefore mended a lot by someone, probably Jean, with a lot of care, It's a simple object, but when I see pictures of Burns among society in Edinburgh, I imagine him wearing these socks. Auld Lang Syne is probably Burns' most famous song, and one of the collection's hero objects. With only 6 manuscript copies of the song still known to exist, it is a significant piece of Scottish culture heritage, and one of the great inspirational importances too. The letter to Sutherland is most significant because of the bird doodles on the back, which I think shows Burns' playful side. The Highland Mary story appeals to the romantic side of the poet. During a time when he had been banned by Jean's father from seeing her, Burns formed a relationship with Highland Mary Campbell and made plans to emigrate to Jamaica with her. However, the successful publication of Kilmarnock edition changed his plans, and he stayed in Scotland and married Jean. Highland Mary's lock of hair had been preserved in the Bible that she had given to Burns when they reported to have exchanged Bibles on the banks of the River Aire. It is said Burns still thought fondly of Mary, who inspired several poems. Thou Lingering Star was written around the 3rd anniversary of Mary's death. The Robert Burns collection can be found online at www.nts.org.uk/collection/Robert-Burns-collection. And that article is written by Mark McDougall and read by me, Aaron. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 23rd of January, from the news section. ScotRail cancel all services on Friday as Storm Eowyn hits. Article by Mark McDougall. ScotRail has confirmed that every service has been cancelled on Friday due to the extreme weather from Storm Eowyn. A red weather warning has been issued by the Met Office with gusts of up to 100 miles per hour to hit the country, and the rail operators decided it is unsafe for any journeys to happen. The strong winds are expected to hit the country from early tomorrow morning, with a weather warning in place from 10 AM across central Scotland, Tayside, Fife, South West Scotland, Lochlan, Borders and Strathclyde. There is also an amber warning for wind across the rest of the country, and a yellow warning for snow covering most of the Highlands. Due to the risk of falling trees and other debris falling on the track, ScotRail has decided it isn't safe enough to operate trains, and no alternative transport will be made available, with customers urged not to travel at all. Customers have also been told they can apply for a fee-free refund on any unused ticket, with customers also told to check the ScotRail website or app before travelling on Saturday. Mark Alderton, ScotRail Service Delivery Director, said, "The Met Office weather warnings for very high winds across the country mean it will not be safe for our customers, and our staff and all ScotRail train services will be suspended on Friday. We recognise the impact that withdrawal of train services will have on customers, but our first priority is to always ensure the safety of our staff and passengers, and this is a necessary step to ensure everyone's safety during the severe weather. Our colleagues at Network Rail Scotland will be working flat out once the worst of the weather passes to carry out safety checks and assess the repairs are required to reopen the railway. We will update our website, mobile app and social media feeds with the latest travel advice, and customers should check for further updates before they attempt to travel on Saturday morning." And that article was written by Mark McDougall and read by me, Aaron. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 23rd of January, from the news section. Expert solves Stone of Destiny's Roman numeral mystery. Article by Jodie Harrison. The researcher who is trying to trace the hidden fragments of the Stone of Destiny believes she has decoded another mystery of the ancient artefact, the Roman numerals which were etched into it. A detailed 3D scan was made of the Stone of Scone ahead of the King's coronation in 2023. This revealed the Roman numerals for 35 were inscribed on the part of the 152 kg sandstone block, which would have been difficult to access. Historical Environment Scotland, which carried out the scan and produced a virtual 3D model of the stone, said it had been unable to ascertain the purpose or the meaning of the inscription. However, Professor Sally Foster of Stirling University believes there may be a relatively modern addition to the centuries-old object and linked to her other area of research. Her theory points to the marking being made by Bertie Gray, the stonemason and nationalist politician who oversaw the secret repair of the stone in 1951. During the famous raid on Westminster Abbey in 1950, when 4 students spirited the stone back to Scotland, it split in two, and Mr. Gray later oversaw the work to repair it. Last week, the PA News Agency reported Professor Foster's appeal to help trace the stories of more than 30 fragments of the original stone which were created during Mr. Gray's work. Professor Foster had already received one word of several fragments which remain in private ownership, including one which ended up in Orkney. Her research has led her to believe Mr. Gray's work led to as many as 34 carefully numbered and recorded pieces. While the theory may be impossible to prove, the Roman numeral 35 could refer to Mr. Gray seeing the Stone of Destiny as the 35th fragment. Professor Foster told the PA News Agency she had come to realisation this week, saying, "The penny dropped, 34 fragments plus one stone equals 35. Of course I can't prove this, but what else might it be? Mr. Gray had never publicly revealed exactly how many pieces he distributed, and he died in 1975. Professor Foster said, "He's writing on it. This is the 35th. It fits in with his sense of humour and with him putting his own mark on the stone." She argues there would have been a few circumstances other than masonry work in which anyone would be able to access the lower part of the stone where the 35 inscription can be found. An article for the Calgary Herald from April 1951 refers to Mr. Gray himself putting the finishing touches on the repairs to the stone and being proud of his work. The article's author, Dick Sanborn, is one of those who received a fragment from Mr. Gray. He kept the piece number 25 behind his desk in the Canadian newspaper's office. Other fragments were given to people in and around the nationalist movement. The Commissioners for Safeguarding the Regalia, the body of senior officials charged with overseeing the Scottish Crown Jewels, are currently considering what should happen with the fragment gifted to Alex Salmon, which was kept in SNP's headquarters. Professor Foster is keen to hear from people who may own or know of one of the fragments of the scone which were distributed by Mr. Gray. She can be contacted on our project's website, thestone.stir.ac.uk, or through Stirling University. A spokeswoman for Historical Environment Scotland said, "We don't know for certain when these markings were made in the stone or what they signify. Whilst they have the appearance of Roman numerals, this does not necessarily mean they date to Roman times. The appearance of the markings and the fact they have not been recorded previously suggest they may have been carved more recently. We hope this is an area for further research." And that article was written by Jodie Harrison and read by me, Aaron.
This article is from the Herald on Thursday the 23rd of January 2025. It is from the Voices section and the headline is, "The Great SNP Ferry Scandal has a long, long way yet to run," and the report is by Brian Wilson. Valdivia sounds a charming place, an old colonial city in the Los Rios region of southern Chile. It just seems an unlikely one in which to build the Colin-Trive-Rubadich ferry, which will take 20 minutes to connect Butte with mainland Argyll. We used to do that kind of thing in Scotland. For anyone who thinks a line was drawn under the great SNP ferry scandal, with the Glen Sannox finally making it into service, that Valdivia option is just one reminder of why this saga has a long way to run, with implications and costs that coastal communities will still be paying for long after John Swinney has retreated to his armchair. Where does Valdivia come into it? The answer lies in a Scottish Government contract to build 6 small ferries for Caledonian McBrain's short routes, Largs to Cumbria and the like. As with everything else, the job is years late and existing vessels are at risk of falling apart. The cost, including shore works, is a relatively modest £185 million. It is exactly the kind of job the Ferguson shipyard at Port Glasgow is more than capable of delivering. In times past, a discreet way of ensuring such an outcome would have been found by sympathetic ministers. If the Scottish Government announced tomorrow a direct award to the Port Glasgow yard with no further messing about, I would be the first to cheer. Sadly, that sensible option is now deemed impossible. Such is the stigma inflicted upon the Ferguson yard by the disastrous political imposition of a contract beyond its capabilities, that when one came along that is well within these capabilities, Ministers and civil servants headed for cover and decreed a global exercise in competitive tendering. So, it's off to Valdivia they shall go. The high Hedians of CMAL, the Scottish Government's accident-prone procurement quango, have headed for the Pacific coast in the line of duty. One of 6 yards shortlisted to build the first phase of Scotland's small vessels replacement programme is indeed in Chile, as CMAL's Chief Executive Kevin Hobbs reminded MSPs in a committee hearing at Holyrood. It's a bit bizarre, Mr Hobbs mused, to walk across the road to a shipyard that you are currently building ships in, and then have to do the rounds of another 5 yards, even to Asenath, the name of the company, in Chile. The Ferguson workers would probably agree with bizarre and have their own expletives to add. The evidence session in which Mr Hobbs and CMAL's head of vessels, Jim Anderson, participated was full of interesting tidbits. For example, all the warranties have expired in the Glen Sannox because it has taken 9 years to build. So, who will pay when something breaks down? That burden now rests with the Ferguson Yard, also owned by the Scottish Government. I suppose it's called the circular economy. It's even worse for the Glen Rossa, for it will probably take 10 years to build, volunteered Mr Hobbs cheerfully. Asked when and at what cost that second Ferguson ferry will be ready, Mr Anderson was unable to answer because Ferguson hasn't produced a plan. There has been a bit of a revolving door in the business, he added, and so it went on. Bizarre, or maybe even surreal? One of the biggest unresolved legacy issues is the fate of Ardrossan. Let's get this one right. 10 years after ordering a ferry to sail from Ardrossan to Brodick is 7 more than any sane person would have anticipated. Yet, there is still no certainty or early likelihood that the mainland port will be capable of accommodating the most delayed ferry in history. Anyone who thinks this is by mere inadvertence is an innocent abroad, or an SNP cult member who can see no wrong in the anointed ones. The fate of Ardrossan started to be written in 2016, when the then Transport Minister, Humza Yousaf, announced a review of whether the Arran service should operate from Ardrossan or Troon, which is owned by Associated British Ports. Nobody else asked for this review. At the last count, 95% of Arran ferry users want to stick with Ardrossan. As I wrote at the time, Mr Yousaf's intervention was solely at the behest of Associated Ports, which has lost its Irish services and needs a substitute. It is blatantly opportunistic. Ardrossan was the intended victim, and that was 9 years ago. Ever since, delay has been the ally of deviousness, until eventually we have reached the incredible point at which the Glen Sannox is finally in service but is incapable of berthing at Ardrossan, far less utilising LNG facilities, which were supposed to be the magical essential ingredient in the whole enterprise, pushing up the cost by heaven knows how many millions. The interests of my former constituents and their heirs in Ardrossan and Arran have been treated with utter contempt by SNP ministers. If anything, though it is finely balanced, the Ardrossan scandal is greater than the Glen Sannox one. With almost a decade to think about it, since Nicola Sturgeon bustled down to Port Glasgow to announce the Ferguson contract in the face of all reason, nothing has been done to ensure the future of the mainland port. I guess that between now and the 2026 election, there will be some lip service to Ardrossan as political cover. With the ferry now plying from Troon, I will not believe a word of it without money on the table and boots on the ground. At minimum, Ardrossan has been condemned to several years in the wilderness, and that whole decade-long process has been contemptible to observe. There has been a string of transport ministers in the intervening period, each more useless than the one before. Not one of them, far less the civil servants who pull their strings, have paid any price for these continuing follies. It is coastal communities that will continue to suffer, and I haven't even got beyond the Clyde. That report was by Brian Wilson.
The Herald, Friday the 24th of January, from the news section. Axel Rudakabana sentenced to 52 years for the Southport murders, by Mark McDougall. Axel Rudakabana has been sentenced to a minimum of 52 years for the murders of 3 young girls and the attempted murder of 8 more children. The 18-year-old stabbed Alice De Silva Aguirre, 9, BB King, 6 and Elsie Stancombe, 7 in Southport last year. Mr Justice Goose, who presided over the court case, said he would have given him a full life sentence if he had been allowed to, but the fact he was aged under 18 at the time of the murders, he was unable to do so. But he did sentence him to a minimum term of 52 years for the crimes, which were committed on July the 29th, 2024, and says he expects him to never be released. Mr Justice Goose said, "I have read each of the victim personal statements and many have been read out in court. They are all deeply moving. The harm Rudakabana has caused to each family, each child, and to the community has been profound and permanent. For the families of Elsie, Bibi and Alice, they will never recover for what happened to their daughters. For those children and adults be attempted to murder, their lives will never be the same. In just 15 minutes, Rudakabana murdered 3 children and attempted to murder 8 other children and 2 adults. He was prevented from murdering more only by the escape of other children. Had he been 18, I make it clear I would have been compelled to impose on him life imprisonment without a minimum term. However, the law does not permit such a sentence for these offenders who are under 18 when they offend. I consider at this time it is likely he will never be released and will be in custody for all of his life. The prosecution has made it clear this does not meet the definition of an act of terrorism within the meaning of the legislation. As there is no evidence the purpose was to advance a particular political or ideological cause, I must accept that conclusion. However, his culpability is equivalent in its seriousness to terrorist murders, whatever his purpose. What he did on July the 29th caused such shock and revulsion that it must be seen as the most extreme level of crime.
The Herald on the 28th of January and the Arts and Ents section. Harrison Ford teams up with Glenmorangie for Whiskey Films by Gabriel Mackay. Legendary actor Harrison Ford has teamed up with Joel Edgerton for a new series detailing the work that goes into producing single malt whiskey in the Highlands. The 82-year-old is famed for playing all-action archaeologist Indiana Jones and the roguish Han Solo in the Star Wars franchise, as well as his roles in film like Blade Runner, Witness, and the 1993 remake of The Fugitive. In a new series of episode films, Mr. Ford teams up with the gift writer and director Edgerton to discover the skill and craftsmanship that goes into making Glenmorangie. Filmed on location in the North East Highlands, Once Upon a Time in Scotland sees the actor enjoy the authentic Scottish experience, from getting to grips with the nuances of Scottish pronunciation and kilt etiquette to bonding with locals over a dram of single malt, all shot in an unconventional, deliberately off-script style. The campaign captures the natural beauty of the local area, from the historic distillery in Tain, where Glenmorangie has been created for over 180 years, to the storied 19th century Ardross Castle and the dramatic landscapes surrounding Loch Glass. The Hollywood legend said, "I loved working with the team at the distillery. They were all great. The whole process of filming was full of unanticipated joys, little unexpected moments. It's a tribute to Glenmorangie's sensibilities that they let us be less than totally serious. I think that what Joel has produced has a certain charm to it, because it's unpretentious and just amusing." John Edgerton, director Once Upon a Time for Scotland, said, "I've spent my whole life watching commercials that follow an expected format. So I really like it when things are a little disruptive, fun and irreverent. It was nice that we got a chance within the very traditional industry of whisky to get behind the scenes, to subvert the seriousness that often goes into advertising campaign, and to have fun with that. I hope that people get to see the short film and the full-length episodes and enjoy them and share them around. Caspar McRae, president and CEO of the Glenmorangie Company, said Harrison Ford is the real deal, a true global icon and a genuine whisky lover. It was a dream come true to collaborate on this campaign and welcome him to our home in the Highlands to discover more about Glenmorangie. He is someone who has honed his craft over decades, which gives him a real appreciation for the dedication and skill of our distillery team. Like us, he's not afraid to laugh at himself, and I think Joel has perfectly captured his authentic warmth alongside his roguish sense of humour. We hope whisky lovers around the world will enjoy exploring the episodes and learning more about the real people and places behind our whiskies through Harrison's eyes. Mr. Ford is far from the only Hollywood star to get involved in the world of whisky. The late Sean Connery was the face of Dewar's Special Reserve 12-year-old in 2004, while his fellow James Bond, Pierce Brosnan, was seen drinking Talisker in The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day. Christina Hendricks of Mad Men fame was an ambassador for Johnny Walker Blue Label, and Ratatouille star Patton Oswalt frequently talks about his love for single malts. The character of Ron Swanson in the sitcom Parks and Recreation frequently enjoys a dram of Lagavulin 16, the real-life favourite whisky of the actor who portrays him, Nick Offerman. One episode sees the character visit the distillery on Islay and recite a poem by Robert Burns, and Lagavulin now offers an Offerman edition. Once Upon a Time in Scotland will roll out globally from 28 January 2025, spanning online video, connected TV, out-of-home formats, experiential PR and social media. 6 full-length episodes and an array of behind-the-scenes content will initially be available to view on glenmorangie.com, with the rest released through 2025. And that was by Gabriel Mackay. The Herald on the 28th of January, and the Arts and Ents section. Heaven Forfend. Now there's a sing-along Wicker Man by Lorne Jackson. Bean Scene. English teacher Rosalind Simpson was warning a class to avoid cliches and stock phrases when writing essays. She printed a list of examples so the pupils would have a good idea what would get them marked down. One example was the admittedly old-fashioned phrase, happy as Larry. Studying the sentence with a confused look on his face, a young scholar eventually felt compelled to ask, who's this Larry dude and why he's so happy? Is he mad with the beans? Note, we're relatively certain the beans mentioned above are not the type canned by Heinz. Burning Ambition, the diary mentioned there's a sing-along version of creepy horror flick The Wicker Man. As film buffs will be aware, the story takes place on a tranquil Scottish island, which turns out to be not that tranquil after all, for locals don't have great TV reception, so they have to provide their own entertainment, which involves, spoiler alert, worship of eldritch pagan deities and much prancing about outdoors in the nude. The islands don't even wear socks or mittens when they're prancing, so it's surprising that they manage to avoid getting the sniffles. Though by the movie's climax, second spoiler alert, not everyone is in the best of health. Having discovered there's a sing-along Wicker Man, the diary is now deciding which songs should appear in this musical version. Reader Dave Harrison, who's obviously watched the movie to its gruesome finale, suggests the popular hit by The Prodigy, Firestarter. On the Rocks, getting older means being confronted by many dangers, notes reader Charles Nelson, who says the microwave pinged unexpectedly, startling me. Now I've thrown my back out. I told everyone at work it was a rugby injury. Not sure they believe me. Chocks away. History buff Roger Graham is reading a book about the Great Siege of Malta, as he mentioned to a pal in the pub. What's that? Inquired the pal. A famous battle, explained Roger. That's not fame, scoffed the pal. Taylor Swift is famous, but no one's heard of your great sneeze of Malteser. Get the legendary Herald Diary straight into your inbox. Windy woes. Storm Irwin smashed a Giffnock gym's window, providing a nasty surprise for people working on nearby exercise machines. Isabel Stewart mentioned this to her husband, who nodded in a satisfied manner, then said, "I always knew exercise was bad for the health." Wimbledon woes. Tech-savvy diary correspondent Sam Jordan claims he's made a website for depressed tennis players, but the servers are currently down. And that was by Lorne Jackson.
From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 26th of January. From the politics section, Kevin McKenna's diary. Glasgow Jews have been made to feel unwelcome by Kevin McKenna. As an uneasy peace at last descends on Palestine, my thoughts have been with Glasgow's much-loved Jewish and Muslim communities. Both have suffered greatly at what their people have had to endure since Hamas tortured and slaughtered more than 1,200 people on October the 7th, 2023. Both of these groups have contributed so much to the economy of Glasgow and to its culture that my city would be a far poorer place without them. These communities, whose DNA is as Glaswegian as my own, have coexisted peacefully with each other and with more than a degree of harmony and warmth. My fervent hope is that they both continue to prosper and to gift their talents and their cultural riches to Glasgow. I think too that the rest of us can help them recover from the trauma of seeing their people suffering in Gaza by making it clear to them that they're welcome here and that their presence makes Glasgow a better place. In particular, my heart is with my Jewish friends. For the first time since their families began to arrive here in numbers fleeing the Nazi pogroms and the attempt to wipe them completely from the face of the earth, Glasgow's Jews were too often made to feel unwelcome in this city this last year or so. The Friends of Israel still has been a fixture on Buchanan Street for many years, arguing for greater understanding of the serpentine politics of the Middle East and peaceful coexistence within a two-state framework. Some of those who volunteer at this outpost are directly descended from families who were crushed by the Nazi regime. Yet, for more than a year, they were made to feel like outcasts once more. I personally witnessed some of them being spat upon, abused and threatened by people whose ignorance of the Middle East was matched only by their eagerness to channel something approaching raw anti-Semitism. It seemed that events in Gaza had provided an outlet for a dormant hatred of Israel and its right even to exist. The majority of the abusers weren't Muslims either. For the first time, too, many of those with whom I spoke began to consider uprooting their families from this city they had come to love and flee somewhere that might make them feel safer. It made me ashamed. I was also present last October when a few hundred of Glasgow's Jewish community gathered at Kelvingrove to remember the hostages still being held by Hamas. In time, the full extent of how barbarously they were treated by their captors will emerge, but we already know that for some the depravity of the October the 7th massacre marked their captivity. Yet, even as they held this peaceful ritual, they were tormented by what can only be described as a mob of protesters who refused to leave them in peace even as they mourned their brothers and sisters in captivity. These were led by some familiar characters who, armed with a massive sound system, were hell-bent on disrupting them and drowning out their prayers. Almost as shocking as this was that a large police presence stood by and permitted this raw hatred of Glasgow's Jewish community to proceed unchallenged. It was to the credit of these Jewish mourners that they resisted the urge to react aggressively and thus avoid what could have been a violent confrontation. Many of the so-called demonstrators had diverted from their own pro-Palestine march elsewhere in the city that day. This is one of many that have proceeded throughout the year in Glasgow, all of them unhindered, even as they defamed Israel and questioned its right to exist. A much more pleasant and uplifting occasion last year occurred when I visited the Garnet Hill Synagogue, a Grade A listed Glaswegian architectural jewel that was built 145 years ago. On the day of my visit, community leaders and volunteers were preparing for a mini pilgrimage that would proceed to the streets of Glasgow a few days later. It would start from the nearby St Aloys Catholic Church in Garnet Hill, and members of the city's main faith groups, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs and Buddhists, would all be represented. From there, we visit some of the principal centres of all the faiths and culture which helped make Glasgow great. The Garnet Hill Synagogue was the first purpose-built one in Scotland and is home to the Scottish Jewish Heritage Centre and to the Scottish Jewish Archive Centre. It's also home to the Little White-Walled Scottish Holocaust Study Centre, where Adolf Hitler's attempt to remove all traces of this holy people from the earth are chronicled in all its satanic wickedness, from Kristallnacht to the horrors of the Nazi death camps. Yet, nowhere in this building were there any traces of anything that spoke of bitterness or revenge. It merely channeled both the grief in the entire people and a yearning to reach out to the rest of us and to educate us so that this evil can never again be summoned. The Scottish Holocaust Study Centre also chronicled the story of the Jewish people in Scotland and Glasgow in particular. Here you learn that one of Glasgow's greatest historical attributes is how it provided a warm welcome to this people in the darkest days of their history. You also learn how history of many of these old families are now woven into the fabric of the city itself, helping build our economy and active in every aspect of the city's life. Every Glaswegian should visit this sacred place. Glasgow's Jewish people choose not to sit apart from the rest of us, but to share the riches of their faith and culture with us. Acts of violence are alien to them. Instead, they live peacefully among us, taking nothing from us and provide generosity and friendship. They have been a blessing for this city. Scotland and Glasgow are held in high esteem across the Jewish world for providing a haven for them and helping them flourish once more where many other countries shunned them. It's my dearest hope that this reputation hasn't been damaged by the events of the last 16 months. And that article was written by Kev McKenna and read by Ian McKenna, no relation. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 26th of January, from the news section, thousands still without power as Storm Ailwyn clean-up continues. Report by Nick Forbes. Thousands of homes remain without power and travel disruption is continuing in Scotland in the aftermath of Storm Ailwyn, which swept across the country on Friday. SP Energy Networks said its engineers had worked through the night to restore power to homes after winds of up to 100 miles per hour caused extensive damage to the electricity network. On Sunday morning, the company said supplies had now been restored to 165,000 homes in central and southern Scotland, but that 14,000 were still without power. As of 7:30pm on Saturday, Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, SSEN, said 12,000 of its customers were still without power. Scottish Power said the severity of the storm, combined with ongoing inclement weather, meant it could take several days to restore power in some areas. The company said nearly 200,000 properties have been affected in the area it serves since the storm began. It added that it had taken more than 52,000 calls so far, about a month's worth of calls in a single day. Eileen Rourke, SP Energy Network Scotland Distribution Director, said, "Our dedicated engineers have continued to work through the night to get many more people back on supply. Unfortunately, the severity of the storm and damage, combined with continued poor weather conditions, means in some areas it could take several days to restore power. We know it is difficult for customers and are updating them on likely timescales to help them plan for the coming days. Hotel accommodation is being provided where possible, and food vouchers, as well as food trucks in the most badly affected areas. We've also worked with local authorities and other partners to arrange warm spaces for people to go to charge phones and get hot food and drinks. We've got our full resources working hard across the country to get people back in supply, and will continue to work closely with the Scottish Government, local authorities and other services to support customers. The company has sent food vans to affected areas and has offered some people temporary accommodation where necessary. It urged people to keep up to date on its social media channels where possible. In a post on social media on Sunday morning, SSEN said work to repair damage done by the storm was continuing. Our teams continue to make good progress, but there's still work to be done on badly damaged parts of the network to get customers reconnected, the post read. We'd like to thank everyone for their patience and understanding as we work hard in challenging conditions. SSEN added that it opened a number of hot food and drink vans in affected areas, with further information on its website and social media channels. A number of public spaces, including parks, have also experienced extensive damage. The Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh said the storm caused severe damage across its gardens. In a post on social media, it said, "At Edinburgh, 15 trees have been lost, either uprooted or damaged beyond recovery. This includes the garden's tallest tree, the 29-metre Cedrus deodora, planted in 1859. Police also said a 19-year-old man died in hospital on Saturday after his car was hit by a falling tree in Ayrshire on Friday morning. Disruption to transport is ongoing, with Network Rail Scotland saying in a statement on social media on Sunday that the storm had done very significant damage to the rail network. The statement read, "Network Rail has reported around 400 individual incidents across the network. These include multiple trees on tracks, damaged overhead wires, power supply failures, other objects on the line, and more. We have managed to reopen some lines, including between Perth and Inverness, between Inverness and Elgin, between Inverness and Aberdeen, between Dundee and Aberdeen, between Perth and Dundee, between Edinburgh and Tweed Bank, between Edinburgh and Dunbar, and between Drem and Edinburgh." And that report was by Nick Forbes. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 26th of January 2025, from the news section, women in Scottish politics speak out on sexual harassment. This article is an exclusive by Hannah Brown. Women who worked in Holyrood have told the Herald that lad culture is so deeply ingrained in Scottish politics that sexual harassment, discrimination and prejudice from colleagues and politicians is now commonplace. All of Scotland's main political parties have internal complaints procedures for incidents of sexual harassment, assault or bullying. However, many of the women we spoke to said they feel unable to come forward as they do not want to go through a painful and time-consuming process. One woman told us she had been sexually assaulted by a male colleague on a work night out. Others said they knew of someone who had been sexually assaulted by a male party member outside of work. All of the women asked to remain anonymous. Many of them were young at the time of the incidents. One woman, who works for an SNP politician, said a member of her party had harassed her over work email so relentlessly that it only stopped when she told the MP she worked for about it, and he immediately intervened. The SNP insider said, "I was fortunate that my boss handled this so well, but I know many might not be. It is not normal or acceptable to be emailed so frequently, being asked for your number, where you live, what gym you go to, when you are simply trying to do your job." When she was working in Holyrood, she said that another woman in her party said she only got her job as an SNP MSP staffer because she was young and pretty. The source added, she went on to say that I had benefited from the old boys network. As a young woman, it's baffling to understand the logic behind that comment, but it just goes to show that this cruelty is not exclusive to men. Women can be perpetrators too. One person involved with the Scottish Greens told us that the culture in the party had rapidly deteriorated and no efforts had been made to stop that. They said at their recent conference, young women were made to feel intimidated by predominantly male party members as a result of rising hostile behaviour in their ranks. The source said it was an intimidating and aggressive environment, and senior party members did nothing to stop it. The source said there was a procedural disagreement around the handling of motion. There were a handful of mainly men, party members and senior councillors, getting up and getting really rude, blunt and nasty towards the young woman. There are better ways of handling disagreements, and these people should know better. The Green Insider said that they know that young women have been put off participating in party procedures again, and that they're also aware of a wider issue of burnout affecting predominantly senior female volunteers because of the strain that is placed on them. The Scottish Greens co-leader said she was horrified to learn of women being treated this way, and the party is not living up to their core value of equality when experiences like this are happening. Warner later added that steps are being taken to ensure that hostile and aggressive behaviour towards volunteers and staff is not tolerated. One woman from another party said the misogyny was also prevalent among party members. She said, "At a meeting, I suggested we implement a gender balance of co-conveners. This was met with a response, Well, we would have to make sure that any woman who wanted to do it was qualified to do the job. To which I responded, when have you ever said that of any of the men? The answer, never. The party source said lad culture is so deeply ingrained across the political sector that no matter what party you're a member of, you'll be impacted by it. They added, this also means that all political parties need to do the work to fix the issue. As it stands, they're all failing miserably. At best, implementing well-meaning but essentially ineffectual policies, at worst, ignoring the issue altogether. All of the parties say they are committed to ensuring their organisations are open and welcoming spaces for women, and they have complaints procedures written into their code of conduct. Individuals who have experienced sexual harassment or assault are also able to access the Independent Support Service via the Scottish Parliament, which provides advice and support. An advocacy support service is also available, which can provide assistance, including advocacy, to take forward a complaint. There is a form individuals can fill out to submit a formal complaint of bullying and harassment to the Parliament. Investigations into formal complaints are carried out by an independent investigator. Any complaints against MSPs can also be made to the Ethical Standards Commissioner using their complaints form. The Scottish Parliament advises that any complaints of a criminal nature should be reported to Police Scotland. A Scottish Parliament spokesperson said, the Parliament takes a zero-tolerance approach to harassment in the workplace, and any allegations will be taken extremely seriously. We strongly encourage anyone who has witnessed or experienced harassment at Holyrood to come forward. Complaint made to us will be investigated independently. And that article was an exclusive, written by Hannah Brown and read by Ian McKenna.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 27th of January 2025. From the Voices section. My parents' deaths showed me how vital social care is. Article written by Ros Foyer, STUC General Secretary. Since we've just celebrated Burns Night, I'll start by quoting the man. The best laid schemes of mice and men gang after gley. For those who are a bit rusty with their poetry, Burns was meaning that no matter how carefully you may plan and scheme, something might still go wrong. We saw that last week when, finally, the Scottish Government confirmed to us all that their plans for a national care service had hit the buffers. This isn't something to revel in. This is a letdown, another inglorious missed opportunity from the Scottish Government to build world-class public services. Social care matters. I'm about to tell you why, if you'll indulge me. I lost my mum over Christmas, less than a year after my dad passed. Both had got to the age of 90, so it wasn't unexpected, but as an only child, it hit hard. I will miss them both. My dad was lucky, really. He had maintained good health to just beyond his 90th birthday, with a relatively quick decline at the end. In my mum's case, it was a painstakingly long and slow downfall, brought about by Alzheimer's. Those who have watched a family member taken in this manner will understand all too well the tragedy of watching your loved one being slowly robbed of their personality, their wisdom, their memories, and eventually all of their faculties. But what stopped my mum losing her dignity was the outstanding care she received throughout the last decade of her life. Firstly, from social care workers operating in the community and visiting her and my dad regularly at home, and then later from the staff at the 3 different nursing homes she lived in. What the last decade has shown me, up close from a service user's viewpoint, is the huge pressure and strain our care services are under. It's also shown me how crucial our care workers are, and just how difficult their work is. In adult care in particular, it is often care workers who are most closely involved in steering us safely and gently towards the exit at the end of our lives, and how they do that has a massive impact on the quality of our lives in our final years. I know, having seen them in action, that I could not do their job. It takes a special level of compassion and humanity, as well as a high level of skills, to do the work well. We need to value all those working in this sector for doing such a tough job in such a tender manner. We live in an ever-increasing world of data, emerging technologies, and artificial intelligence. The discussion on how that changes the world of work is for another day. What I do know is that not one spreadsheet, not one chatbot, nor one ChatGPT AI program will ever hold a candle to the humanity of social care workers who care for our relatives in their final moments. When my dad died, it was his community social care worker who came into the house along with me to find him. It was her who checked him for any signs of life, gently closed his eyes over, covered him up, sat me down, and made me a cuppa. Then she calmly contacted the emergency services, whilst I sat there weeping and in shock. The reason my mum was in 3 different nursing homes is because the first 2 not-for-profit ones closed down due to lack of adequate funding. She received great care in the first 2 places, but the upheaval of moving was difficult for someone with advancing dementia, and finding a new placement each time for her was stressful for us all as a family. The nursing home staff in her final home made her last years full of smiles and happy times. They also ensured that her last days were not spent in a hospital, but instead were in her own room where, when her body had got to the point where she couldn't remember how to eat or swallow, they made sure her exit from this life was as dignified, painless, and gentle as possible. I will forever be grateful for the way all of the workers who cared for both my parents conducted their roles with such high standards of professionalism. But I saw firsthand the difficulties caused to those workers by staffing shortages, the lack of adequate resources to provide the prescribed care packages, and the low pay and poor employment packages many worked under. The experience is seared into my consciousness. How could it not be? The need for us as a society to ensure that these workers are valued, respected, most importantly paid fairly to reflect the very vital and difficult role they do, must be a defining mission of our state. That's why the handling of the proposed National Care Service has been such a letdown. The idea seemed pure and noble, an NHS-style system of national social care which gave care at the point of entry from well-paid, highly skilled and well-treated workers. But if you look under the bonnet, it was a car without an engine. Early suggestions from government that it was comparable to the NHS were way off the mark. Instead, we got over £30 million spent on developing a national care service model that lacked vision, left service provision at the mercy of profiteers, and didn't address low pay and poor conditions in the sector. It's little wonder, therefore, that workers lost faith in the government's plans. Service users across the country deserve better. The current system isn't working for them or those that deliver their care. Yet care sector workers won't be celebrating this announcement, and it's yet another blow to their trust in Scottish Government. We have to make it easier for our loved ones to access the care they need in their most vulnerable moments. We owe it to their memories to support and reward the public servants who provide that care. Ross Foyer is General Secretary of the STUC, and the article was read to you by Elizabeth.
From Herald Scotland, 23rd of January 2025. From the STEM section of the business section. Opportunities on the horizon for City of Glasgow College students. And this is an article by a community contributor. A global leader in maritime and STEM education, City of Glasgow College equips graduates with the skills to drive sustainable innovation and meet demand in the booming offshore sector. Over 95% of the UK's imports and exports are transported by sea, making the maritime industry the 3rd largest revenue generator in the UK, contributing over £50 billion annually to the economy. With 484 million metric tonnes of port freight handled and over 21,000 UK seafarers active at sea, alongside 180,000 maritime sector employees and a booming offshore renewables sector demanding skilled talent, the need for skilled maritime professionals is at an all-time high. City of Glasgow College is leading the charge in meeting this demand, delivering world-class nautical and STEM education. As Scotland's largest and most advanced facility of its kind, the college has earned a formidable reputation for high-quality training in these critical fields. Situated on the banks of the River Clyde in the very heart of Glasgow city centre, the Riverside campus is a maritime centre of excellence, training nearly half of the UK's merchant navy officers annually. It houses Europe's most advanced shipping simulator, providing students with an unrivaled platform to hone their skills in realistic, high-pressure scenarios. This cutting-edge technology ensures graduates are fully prepared to navigate the complexities of modern maritime operations. City of Glasgow College is proud to be a leader in maritime and STEM education, said Chris Keenan, Dean of the Nautical and STEM faculty. Our innovation programmes, state-of-the-art facilities and robust industry partnerships ensure our graduates are equipped to excel in a sector that is both challenging and rewarding. We are committed to advancing the maritime industry's growth while championing sustainability and innovation. Graduates from City of Glasgow College find themselves at the helm of a thriving industry, working sectors from offshore renewables, Arctic expedition vehicles, global freight, to luxury cruise liners and super yachts. With starting salaries for cadets exceeding £35,000 and opportunities for international travel and rapid career advancement, maritime careers are among the most rewarding. The college's comprehensive training programmes are meticulously designed to align with industry requirements, addressing the growing demand for highly skilled professionals. The college is also playing a pivotal role in shaping the future of maritime sustainability. Recent initiatives include a landmark conference in Decarbonising the Offshore Wind Industry, which convened industry leaders, policymakers and academics to explore strategies for reducing emissions and achieving net zero targets. This builds on the college's contributions at COP26, where it showcased innovative solutions for decarbonising global shipping. Such initiatives demonstrate City of Glasgow College's commitment to tackling the pressing challenges of climate change. Collaborating with key players in the maritime and offshore sectors, the college ensures its curriculum remains relevant and forward-thinking. These partnerships facilitate invaluable opportunities for work placements, internships and industry networking, giving students a competitive edge in a highly dynamic job market. The Riverside campus stands as a beacon of excellence, offering advanced simulation suites for engine operations, navigation and cargo handling. This comprehensive training environment is designed to empower students to master every aspect of maritime operations. The Riverside campus also serves as a hub for research and innovation. Its faculty and students are at the forefront of pioneering projects that address critical challenges in the maritime sector. One such achievement is the college's innovative research into oxygen depletion in confined spaces aboard ships, which earned the prestigious Queen's Anniversary Award. This life-saving work has set new benchmarks for safety standards, reaffirming the college's role as a global leader in maritime education and research. Scotland's ports are undergoing significant transformations to embrace a greener, more sustainable future. Projects like the Port of Aberdeen's shore power system exemplify the industry's commitment to reducing emissions and enhancing operational efficiency. City of Glasgow College plays a crucial role in this transition, producing graduates equipped to deal with the charge in sustainable innovation. With UK sea trade projected to double in the coming years, the maritime industry's reliance on a skilled workforce has never been more critical. Beyond its educational and research credentials, the Riverside campus is a unique and vibrant community where aspiring maritime professionals thrive. Students benefit from state-of-the-art facilities, a supportive learning environment, and access to some of the most experienced educators and industry experts. This campus is more than a training ground, it is a launchpad for future leaders in the maritime world. And the college's website is at www.cityofglasgowcollege.ac.uk. And that article was written by a community contributor and was brought to you in association with the Herald's Scotland's Ports Commercial Supplement.
The Herald on the 28th of January and the news section. Alice Cooper to return to Scotland as one of only 2 UK gigs in 2025 by Mark McDougall. Alice Cooper is set to return to the UK for the first time in 3 years with a gig at the Edinburgh Playhouse in July. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee will be joined by his band as they perform in the Scottish capital on Wednesday, July 23. The Edinburgh date marks the Poison singers' return for the venue for the first time in more than 20 years. His only other UK gig will take place in Cardiff on the night before the gig in Edinburgh. He said, "Cardiff and Edinburgh, you can't escape. We missed you last year, but now we're coming back. Alice will never let you down. Can't wait to see all the sick things at our show at Utilita Arena in Cardiff on July 22nd and the Edinburgh Playhouse on July 23rd. For Road, I wanted the band to be involved in the foundation of all the songs. I only see these guys when we're on the road, so I wanted them to be as tight as they are for the show, but on all new material. When you've got a band this good, I believe in showing it off, and this is my way of doing so." The Alice Cooper UK dates are July 2025, Tuesday 22, Cardiff Utilita Arena, fully seated show, and Wednesday 23rd, Edinburgh Playhouse, fully seated show. And that was by Mark McDougall. The Herald on the 28th of January and the news section. Biffa given go-ahead to sue government over DRS collapse by Neil Pormerin. A judge has ruled that waste management company Biffa can proceed with suing the Scottish Government for about £160 million following the collapse of the Deposit Return Scheme, DRS. Lawyers representing the government had attempted to have the case dismissed, but Lord Clark ruled it can go ahead at the Court of Session. Biffa's lawyers say Lorna Slater, the Green co-leader who was a minister at the time, negligently misrepresented the state of the scheme, which led to the company investing significantly. In their legal arguments, they highlighted the letter from Ms Slater to Biffa's chief executive in May 2022, which set out ministers' unwavering commitment to deliver the DRS in August 2023. However, the Scottish Government changed its plans when UK ministers used the Internal Market Act, IMA, to rule glass bottles could not be included. A UK-wide DRS is not expected to begin before 2027. Lord Clark said the date on which the Scottish Government sought an exclusion from the IMA is a matter in dispute between the parties. Circularity Scotland, which was set up to administer the Scottish DRS, fell into administration in June 2023, and Biffa's contract was terminated. The company said it expected to make profits of £114.8 million over 10 years through the contract, and it invested £51.4 million in assets like sorting machines as it prepared for the go-live date. The government's lawyers have previously said the decision by Biffa to start spending money on the scheme was a commercial risk the company had chosen to take. They denied Ms Slater had made any negligent misrepresentation and said ministers did not owe a duty of care to Biffa. In his ruling on Tuesday, Lord Clark said the case would not be dismissed. He said on the first part of the claim, for the pursuer to succeed at the proof, the court will have to be satisfied on the following points. There was an assumption of responsibility. The duty was not inconsistent with the statutory powers and duties of the defenders. The pursuer relied and reasonably relied upon the defender's conduct. The breaches of duty occurred, and the loss was caused by the alleged breaches. On the alternative case on negligent misrepresentation, the pursuer mainly requires to prove that the pursuer's contention on the proper interpretation of the letter, when viewed in its full context, is correct, and that the pursuer relied and reasonably relied upon it, causing the loss of costs. Questions also remain in play about the amount of loss and costs and profit which the pursuer can establish. That was by Neil Poran. The Herald on the 28th of January and the news section. Sad to see Buchanan Galleries retailer announces closure, by Esther Tarnay. A retailer at the Buchanan Galleries has announced it is closing. Foodies by SCX took to social media to announce it will stop trading in the popular shopping centre. On Instagram, the firm said, "We have some bittersweet news to share with you. Sadly, our beloved store will be closing its doors. While we're sad to go, we can't help but look back on the amazing time we've had together." The Post continues to thank customers for their support and encourages anyone to visit before the last day of trading, 6 p.m. on February 7. This shop by the Scottish Design Exchange brings together the local food producers and sells a collection of authentic products from Scottish producers. And that was by Esther Tarnay. The Herald on the 28th of January and the news section. Drug deaths in Scotland dropped by 10% in new figures released by Neil Poran. Suspected drug deaths have fallen by 10% in the latest quarterly data, with drug-related attendances at A&E seeing a similar decrease. Incidents of naloxone administration, which can prevent heroin overdoses, were also down by 30% in September to November last year. The latest Rapid Action Drugs Alerts and Response Radar report noted that the contamination of illicit drugs with toxic substances is common and widespread across drug types. It said there remains an urgent need for hospital toxicology and accessible drug checking services across the country. There has also been an increase in novel benzodiazepines circulating in Scotland, while cocaine continues to play a leading role in drug harm. Between September and November, there were 215 suspected drugs deaths, with this figure being 10% lower than the previous quarter and down by 15% from the same time last year. Drug-related attendances at A&E were down 10% from the previous quarter and 16% lower than in 2023. The Scottish Ambulance Service recorded 700 naloxone administrations over the time period, down by 30% from the previous quarter and down 34% from the same period in 2023. The figures will not encompass the effect of the UK's first safer drug consumption facility, which opened in Glasgow in January. The Thistle Centre saw 131 attendances in its first week of operation. Health Secretary Neil Gray said, "Through our 5-year, £250 million national mission on drugs, we're taking a wide range of actions, including working towards the opening of drug checking facilities, which would enable us to respond faster to emerging drug trends, opening the UK's first safer drug consumption facility pilot, and widening access to residential rehab, treatment and life-saving naloxone."
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 28th of January 2025, from the business section. Scottish Water announced major price hike in bills from April. This article is by Lucinda Cameron. Water bills in Scotland are to rise by 9.9% in April, Scottish Water has announced. It said this means the average monthly household bills for water and wastewater services will increase by £3.68 per month, or £44 per year from April the 1st. The Scottish Water said current infrastructure is put under significant pressure as weather conditions become more extreme, with more periods of both drought and intense rainfall, and more investment is needed. It follows an 8.8% increase last year. Scottish Water, which is publicly owned, said more than half, 52%, of the households it serves, around 2.6 million in Scotland, receive financial support with their charges. Alex Plant, Chief Executive of Scottish Water, said, "People in Scotland are rightly proud of our water, and maintaining our high standards means we need long-term, sustainable investment. We've all seen, including in the last few days, how weather conditions in Scotland are becoming more extreme, and we are seeing more frequent periods of both drought and intense rainfall. This puts our current infrastructure under significant pressure, and without increased investment, we risk reductions in service quality in the future." Today's announcement will enable us to continue to provide essential, high-quality services to millions of people today, while also investing prudently for the future and ensuring that costs are shared fairly between current and future generations. Most household water and wastewater bills are collected along with council tax, and the charges are based on the council tax banding of the property. The company said the charges, which are set by the Scottish Water Board, are in line with the overall price cap set by the independent regulator for the current regulatory period. It said that the £44 annual increase for an average household in Scotland reflects a decision by the board to rebalance charges in the earlier years of the 2021 to 2027 regulatory period to help reduce pressure on families and businesses at the height of the COVID and cost of living crises. Water and wastewater charges to licensed providers who supply businesses and other non-domestic customers will increase by the same amount. That article was by Lucinda Cameron.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, tune, review, and tell your friends about our service.